This is The Breakup Theory, conversations on ending things and collective liberation. Oh my God, we're so back. As with everyone, this has been a year of hell or lead pain or whatever. I've only been able to release a few episodes so far. But let me tell you, I'm sitting on a few waiting to be edited, that's on me, and plans for more, getting back to regular production. For this episode, I invited the beautiful Dean Spade to respond to a listener letter with me. He started up a podcast in the wake of his book with the same name, Love in a Fucked Up World, where he's been discussing relationships and giving advice about how we can fight and love better together. This letter came from someone who had a terrible experience with an accountability process, and over the years, this has caused them to become disenchanted with the ideas of transformative justice, prefigurative politics, community, and life. It's gotten really bad for them. As Dean has many years of experience with TJ and accountability, working with different groups and figuring out how to address conflicts, dealing with conflicts in his own groups, I thought he'd be a perfect person to think this through with. Now, we aren't able to solve the letter writer's problem, of course, but we explore all the ways that it becomes difficult to deal with conflict, how we lose faith in accountability and any kind of movement work, and how the inability to figure out relationship issues derail us. We discuss the emotional spaces that all of these issues take us into, the trauma and pain we bring into each room, and the ways we get stuck perceiving others' perceptions of us. I personally share a kind of pessimism on accountability with the letter writer, as you may know if you read some of my recent work, while Dean offers a more capacious understanding that transformative justice describes any situation where we don't involve cops, defer to any authority, and no one gets arrested, and someone listens to a survivor. It isn't based on the success so much as the attempts to address conflicts. In this way, many of the problems end up coming from high expectations, a lack in skills in addressing conflict or doing mediation, and then some lingering liberal models. And this is often on the side of the people trying to facilitate. Some of the advice we do offer pertains more to how someone can try to find healing in themselves and do a process, including grieving, even when people are disappointing them, even alone. As always, I come down to letting people go, letting them and yourself off the hook. Try to find the simplest soothing that you can, even just a hand on your chest. I hope that the writer takes something from this. Their letter is already very insightful about the issue, so even that seems to me to be a step. Probably not towards a re-enchantment, but perhaps towards something else. Just to give a content warning, there's mention of suicidal ideation and suicide in the letter. If you don't want to listen to that, you can skip the letter. We don't get into it so much in the discussion, but you can also skip the whole episode. If you want to support me in the making of this podcast, please go over to cawshinythings.com, C-A-W, shinythings.com. This is where my writer-worker collective, Caw, with Carla Joy Bergman, Danny Burleson, and Vicky Osterweil, lives. Over there, we offer a variety of things, some for paid subscription and some freely available. The podcast, advice columns, stickers, zines, and a regular roundup of our work comes with a free subscription. But if you pay $5 a month, you have access to all of our content, including a Discord where we offer writing workshops, movie nights, and book clubs. The Breakup Theory is part of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts. You can check out all of the offerings at channelzeronetwork.com. And now, Dean and I tackle this deep and poignant letter. All right, so really lucky to have the wonderful Dean Spade back on the podcast to do one of the listener letters with me. There's no one better, I think, than Dean to do something like this with. He just started his own podcast with the same name as his recent book we discussed on an earlier episode, Love in a Fucked Up World, where he is also talking about relationship issues within the context of organizing and liberatory movements. So this is why I invited Dean back on, because we have a pretty tricky letter to try to address.
I'm very excited to have this conversation with you, even though I think it's a challenging one.
Well, I'm going to read the letter. I'm going to read the whole letter because I think it's necessary, and then we will start our discussion. Just a content warning at the beginning, the letter mentions suicidal ideation. So if that is something that you don't want to hear, you might skip the whole episode, or at least the letter. Okay. I'm going through an intense depression and disillusionment and finding it hard to keep making my way through the world. Several years ago, I reached out to some friends I'd organized with for many years to help facilitate a conflict mediation between me and another person in our movement based on principles of transformative justice. The group enthusiastically agreed and took on the responsibility for the mediation, but through carelessness and a lack of capacity, they let me down in very extreme ways, holding an unsafe and indefinitely protracted process that caused harm to everyone involved. After years of limbo and inaction, the so-called process finally ended abruptly since the other participant decided to leave and moved away. I feel no resentment or ill will to that person. I hope they're doing okay, and feel heartbroken and sad that our conflict became so painful and increasingly impossible to work through together. But the betrayal by the facilitators, friends who were supposed to help us through this according to our shared political principles, that's something I haven't been able to get over. It's been eating away at my soul every single day in the few years since the process ended. I no longer have contact with the facilitators. This is because I asked for space after it became clear they were incapable of taking any accountability or offering any means of repairing all the harm they caused. The boundary is what I need to feel safe, but it's cut me off from my entire political community, which they're very prominent and visible actors in. And keeping yourself safe inside a bunker is pretty shit. In the past couple of months, I've been dealing increasingly with suicidal thoughts, which are starting to feel or become less and less abstract. I've realized that the whole episode, while it was years ago, has totally and fundamentally shattered my faith in human relationships, in humanity in general, to be honest. And that's led to a disillusionment with my core ethical and political principles. If I can't believe in us to look after each other, even when there is all the will in the world, if I can't believe that we can work through harm and conflict without irrevocably destroying each other's lives and breaking each other's spirits, it doesn't feel like there's anything to live for. For a long time since this happened, I didn't feel safe with other people. I didn't feel like I could trust anyone again. But over time, the mistrust has morphed into something heavier, just a total lack of libido for being on this earth in community with others. I know prefigurative politics aren't perfect, and that's the point, but this fuck-up was so major and had such devastating consequences that it would have been better if nothing had happened at all. How could I believe in any of this again? I want political and relational re-enchantment, and I want to be alive. I know that when something breaks, it can't be unbroken. Instead, something new is supposed to emerge, but it truly doesn't feel like there's anything for me in this rubble. So there's a lot in that. And first, I really feel for this person and the pain that they're going through. Maybe, Dean, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I mean, they write about it so vividly. What that's like. They use the word like loss of libido, like the kinds of betrayals or experiences with other people. And I think a lot of us have this in organizing. Other people also have it in love, sometimes love relationships or housing situations that fall apart. Like a lot of these things can just cut really close to like losing faith, like really uncovering where we've expected things to be different. We relied on people and we maybe even were operating, it almost sounds like they were operating in their entire participation in the movement on a certain kind of hope for how people are that felt undermined by the way that this group of people didn't hold this role they signed up for facilitating this conflict. And I've heard a lot of stories similar and overlapping with this. And my first feeling is like, I can feel connected to this type of human experience of this level of betrayal or loss where you're like, what even is it to be a person, to be with others, to collaborate? And they are able to articulate it very beautifully in a way that I hope maybe helps others heal, just to hear that experience named. I'm curious how it lands when you read it the first time, Julie.
I agree with you that like sharing this, I think, is very important because other people may feel isolated in their disappointment with similar kinds of processes, or even feel like they weren't able to start those, or that they were pushed into things that they didn't want. So feeling that you're not alone in an experience like that, which may feel like it singles you out or yet you're the problem, I think is really important. Because also just when a conflict and harm happens, I think it can be super isolating. Even when you have a community saying that they're supporting you, it's hard to hold that position of the person who has been harmed or who's a victim and feel supported, because I don't think a lot of people really even know how to support someone that deeply. And like you said, we may hold people to a higher standard if we have this kind of shared political orientation, and the space that we're doing is like enacting prefigurative politics and trying to, build a better world. So it's like even more disappointing, I think, when people who you think are on the same page with you do not rise up to that level that you're hoping. So it's like maybe even a deeper disappointment because of that. And I'm not sure, like we don't know what the conflict is. Often I feel like conflicts like this are around emotional or sexual harm within a relationship that happens within a movement space, and then the people around are asked to be part of it. But this actually doesn't sound like it's necessarily something like that. It might have been some other kind of conflict. So I don't want to assume, but I think we might be able to address, either kind of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen stories like this about every kind of conflict, between roommates, between lovers, between ex-friends, people who had things break down around just the way what they were doing organizing without any sexual or living together or even deep friendship piece. I really feel like so many kinds of conflict can be hard enough that we end up in something where other people are recruited to try to help facilitate it. I mean, another thing that, I read this a couple times, like when you sent it to me, and then I read it again before our conversation, and then hearing you read it just now, one of the things that stood out to me, so we believe in getting rid of cops and not using cops in our conflicts with one another. And so then we are forced to figure out what else there is. And in my view, that is what transformative justice is anytime you don't use the cops, it's not like an organization or a singular approach. It's just like, it's the name for me that I use for the idea of trying to solve conflicts together, not using cops or authority figures, not having somebody be like the court or the expert or whatever. And so in doing that, we get into a really hard thing. Like, most people don't know how to help facilitate stuff like this. Most people, when others are having a conflict, are very activated and may or may not know it. And we do a series of things. We minimize and deny what's happening, or we shut down, or we overly advise somebody who's upset and try to shut them up by being like, no, it's like this. Or we join with them and seek vengeance. Like, most of us do these kind of autopilot, unconscious behaviors. We want resolution really fast from others who are in conflict. I see this a lot if I'm in a meeting when conflict occurs in the meeting. People want to watch let's say, two people who are having the conflict figure it all out right now. And those people, it might be weeks or years. And the group actually could go on with its work. But there's a kind of like, I think almost people go into a regressed place, like I need mommy and daddy to, it's like that's kind of the space a lot of people go into, and people believe that somebody can facilitate that instantaneous resolution. That's not a thing. So there's all of that we all bring, and we all don't have the skills. So on the one hand, in our movements, we're trying to encourage people like, hey, everybody, let's all participate more. Let's all skill up and let's believe we could do this. We don't need cops and authority figures. On the other hand, we have to admit how de-skilled we are. And I find it complicated to hold both of those things. Like how many times this is not done well, and also how well we need to do it. And we need not just to have like a few people become the experts. Like, it's not helpful. That's not helpful too, because then those people disappoint you and you thought they were the experts. That can be its own kind of betrayal. People are more likely to project those people have some kind of magic that nobody has. I don't know. For me, what part of the tragedy of these kinds of stories is just how far we are from where we need to be skills wise, and how painful and disappointing that is. And how hard it is to accept each other as imperfect. Also, how hard it is to face what our expectations were of others, like what we hoped would happen. And how I just feel like what's missing from so many of our movement contexts is just grief. Grief that the conflict itself happened. Grief that nobody's good and nobody will ever hear us enough. Grief that they didn't listen, or they made it about them, or they disappeared. All the things, and trying to get to a place of grieving that enough that we can repair with ourselves, even if we never get an apology, or even, like, how do I go on? I think that inside this person's question is a bit, and this experience is like, how do I go on with having had such an intense betrayal and disappointment of what I was hoping for? I think for a lot of us, how do I come through an experience like that and find a new kind of faith in others and in our resistance practices or in processes that's informed by this difficult experience?
Right. I like how you sort of define transformative justice as simply, I mean, not simple, that it's the way that we try to deal with things outside of the state, of cops and authority figures, because I think that often there's a kind of magical thinking reference to transformative justice when there's a conflict, like, we'll just sort this out with like an accountability process, without really realizing that it's really hard work, that, as you said, most people aren't really skilled in it or have good experience. I mean, a lot of people come into something like that already pessimistic because of the experiences that they've been through. And I think often just saying, oh, we'll do an accountability process, or we'll do transformative justice. Sometimes people feel like it's enough to just say that, without actually doing anything. I think the grief point is really important. And, I want to connect that also to the thing you were talking about with the immediacy that people expect a conflict resolution to happen. Because I know for myself, if I'm activated, I will like double down on something that later I'm like, why the hell was I doing that? But if I walk away and take some space, sometimes it's like pretty quick. I'm like, oh, that was the role that I was playing in this thing that I didn't need to be doing. And it would be so much easier to just like let go of this. So the space actually, I think, is part of the process. And I think that is also applicable to grief because, you can't grieve something immediately in the moment. And grief, the timeline of grief, it's unpredictable and it may repeat and return in all these ways. But this does seem like the dominant feeling that this person is sitting with is a kind of grief about the process, about the trust, and about the loss of the space that they were in. And it's less about the person in the conflict, right? They're able to grieve, it seems, that person with an unresolved conflict. But it's like the structure that was supposed to be held within that they can't really grieve.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know this person or this situation, but I've seen situations too where people get mad at the facilitators instead of the person who hurt them. That's something we all sometimes do, you know, or mad at a particular person in the group instead of mad about the whole dynamic of the group that set things up. I think also we all come into our communities, our friend communities, our political communities with like so many woundings about belonging, so many cumulative hurts. So when I finally make it to this group and you and I are in a group together and it's all trans people and I'm like, yes, this is the moment where I'm going to be seen and understood. Then if somehow you don't see me and understand me, I might feel like all of my vitriol of all the decades of not being seen and understood come out at you. This is all happening between us. And so it's not surprising that we can't easily facilitate through that. I mean, in my travels around, talking to people over the last 25 years, or maybe less than 20 years, that TJ has been more common, or community accountability type words have been more common in some of my, subcultures. People are often like, it doesn't work. We tried it here and it doesn't work. And I'm always like, what's our evaluation method? I'm like, if nobody got arrested, if some people supported a survivor at all instead of completely denying their experience, we're better than we were when we just called the cops or when somebody. I'm just like, the bar is so low for how terribly we all treat each other. I'm like, can we not decide whether it works or not, but just decide we have no choice but to do things to try to respond that are not the police and to do them imperfectly and try to make it get better, and like, I just feel like it's hard for me when people are just like, this doesn't work, because I'm just like, then what, like, I feel like it's okay if we could say, I don't like to be in a circle process after harm happens. I want to focus on relationship skills to prevent harm, or I want to focus on safe parties to prevent harm, or I mean, we all get to choose what kind of work we do to try to stop violence. There's a million kinds. I want to just focus on giving people direct feedback in my group so that we don't build a bigger conflict, or I want to focus, there's so many pieces, but I think I think those of us who are anti-police don't get to give up on trying to resolve conflict together. I think what you said about how you feel when something first happens was really interesting for me. I've been noticing in myself and others that like the first upset is like it's like a big wave. It's like there's this giant wave cresting. It could be like jealousy or betrayal or whatever these sensations are that are really big. It's this big wave, and it's not a good time to act during the big wave. And if people actually listen to each other during the big wave and say, that's really hard, that sounds really hard, and hold each other during the wave and don't try to move to action and don't try to shut somebody up, and don't abandon them. I think that's what happens a lot to people who survive harm, is like just they're just abandoned and isolated, like you were saying at the beginning. If we actually stay with people, I think the conflicts around how to cope with what happened are less. If you stay with me and hear me while it's happening, my system doesn't have to dig in to like more of a vengeance approach or more of
Right.
a I'll never be seen and heard, because my experience of experiencing violence also is if the first people, the bystanders, minimize what happened to you, that's so traumatizing. So if we really think about becoming good, like at immediately supporting and listening to people when they're upset about whatever, then that changes what is possible in like trying to make that happen again, or trying to get the person who did something that was not okay to apologize and stop doing it, or whatever our next need is. And we often miss that moment because it's like, you're upset, I'm scared of you, or I'm joining you, or I'm abandoning you. You know, these are the kinds of, I think that's what I've been focusing on workshops a lot lately. It's just like, how do we all listen to people when they're upset, including when they're upset with us? Someone is yelling
Yeah.
at me. Can I be like, I'm hearing you. That sounds really hard. Can I just stay there before I try to like respond, you know?
Right. It seems like when you talk about it or think about it with yourself, like that's like easy, right? Like theoretically, someone either like mostly what people want is to be heard, right? And to have their experience validated, whether or not it matches with anyone else's experience, they need to be recognized in their pain. But then when you're in the moment, you can get activated, like you said, in yourself, which then you get into a heightened state. Or there's like the peacekeeping attempt, which is like, let's just like make everything okay immediately. And both of those things, either you're going to increase the conflict from bringing in your own worked up energy, or try to silence the person, which makes them feel unheard and isolated, and then could potentially drive someone completely out of a situation because of that. I think that is super important. And maybe that even goes like a long way. I found in relationship conflict that just hearing, like just hearing can resolve a conflict, right? And acknowledging we have two different experiences. Also, like I've talked about this before, but like the kind of distinction between intention and consequence. Like you could be trying really hard to be good, right? And not intentionally trying to harm someone. It's not like a pattern or whatever, but someone feels it for whatever reason. Your instinct might be to be defensive, but like you need to be able to just apologize for the way that your behavior affected someone, regardless of your intention in doing it.
There's something about that I'm trying to learn about right now in myself and others, where it's like, if I don't let myself take seriously what happened and how I'm feeling, I'm going to need you to more.
Mm,
Like, I might be like, the more I can actually grieve the hurt, the less I'll need to seek vengeance and have everyone
right.
witness me being the victim and that how the other person's bad or whatever. It's like, it's really complicated. And there's something for me in here that's very much about anarchism. That's like about authority. Like, if I can self-authorize more and believe myself more and take seriously how bad it felt or feels, then I might not end up accidentally in like an unsatisfiable quest for something from other people that they are like shitty at giving or that is ungivable, you know, which I think happens sometimes. And this is sort of related to me in a lot of groups I'm in where nobody's getting paid, or that I work with or whatever. Nobody's getting paid, nobody's the boss, you know. There's still power dynamics, right? I founded the group, or I'm older than you, or all of our different identities or whatever, you know. And how do we account for those power dynamics in a way that doesn't pretend that person is doing it to us? Do you know what I mean? So like if you founded the group and everyone thinks you're really cool and you have a podcast and you're, you know, an important writer in our community, and I joined the group and I'm much younger than you, and I, you know, something, I don't know, you know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of not disagreeing with you in meetings or something. You know what I mean? And then I build up a whole story and then I tell everybody in the group, like, Shuli's wielding power over me and it's so terrible. You know, like, what can we do to interrupt that? That's a very oversimplified situation. And also, I'm guessing in this story, you'd also be like an imperfect person. But like, it's all magnified because of this way that I encountered you. You know, how do we all take responsibility for all the pieces of that? Both like you keeping in mind that you're the founder of the group or whatever, or that you're more experienced than me in this form of organizing or something, or have a community reputation or something like that. And also me not meaning that means I had no role when I just didn't say what my opinion was in the meetings because you were there. You know what I mean? Like there's just
Yeah.
like these other levels of mutual and self-responsiveness that are so hard in communities where we love to just like name and be mad at power. And I'm like, that also is a reasonable feeling that I want to give love to. Like, yes, I love that we all like hate the powerful and want to take them down, but it really turns out badly when everyone in our group has some kind of power, or could be seen that way because of the complexities of all of our roles, positions, identities, social dynamics, social fears. I think it's just like
Yeah.
it becomes this like accusation machine and this like one of the ways I've been talking about this a lot in workshops right now is like, as many of us have talked about, like in our society, people really fight to feel like the victim. And when you're starting to feel really victimized, it's a good time to like touch base with friends before you take action. Because a lot of people who do harm felt at the moment they
Yeah.
were doing it. I mean, like all these narratives about like all the incels narratives and whatever. It's like a very common space of harm doing in our society. And doesn't always track to actual victimization and stuff. So like in our little groups, when we're about to take aim at somebody else in our own community, I think it's useful before I like press send on that mean message or like, post on the internet about someone else or make my big speech about how terrible Shuli is in the group, like to just be like, am I believing that I am the target or the victim? Can I check out the dynamics and then can other people in my group be good at listening, confidentiality, like if I'm venting to you, don't go tell everybody. That's going to stir the pot. I might actually
Yeah.
have needed. I think people are very bad at confidentiality in our movements. If someone's venting, assume it's confidential unless they tell you they wanted you to go tell the people. And also maybe say to them, "Hey, have you said this directly to the person?" Like I think we could really cut out some of the disorganizing aspects of our conflict with a little more care to these things. If we assume that everybody in this group is worth keeping on some level, often, could we like not get into such protracted conflicts with a few of these skills around listening, confidentiality, and just noticing, oh, I really feel like I'm being victimized right now. I might be activated and I might want to consider my action, for a couple days and talk with some
Right.
people I know who I find to be wise.
Yeah. In terms of the power dynamics within a group, I think that if you, like you said, if you're a person who sort of won't speak up when the person that you think has more power is wielding it in a way that you don't like or that you think the group needs to consider differently, in a way that's ceding more power to that person, right? Because you're just allowing them to do something without speaking up. And speaking up is hard, right? And I think we're, again, like peacekeeping kind of things. We want to avoid conflict. But at some point, then you are accountable for not bringing something up. And I mean, I get that because sometimes it's really scary because you don't know what the response will be and you might be isolated because of it, which is what we've been talking about. But yeah, thinking about the kind of authority structures, I think you take power in a position, right? Power is not bad in itself, but like, yeah, not ceding it to someone to wield because that person maybe is trying to counteract whatever power they know that they are given or have or perceived to have. And, often also people are totally oblivious to it or think they deserve it or whatever. And that's the other thing I would think about is like the identification with roles. Like, someone who does have some kind of like respect out of the years that they've been doing something or the books that they write or like whatever it is might really identify with this role of being special, right? And yeah, that's the work that you have to do. And then there's also the victim thing, right? Identifying with the role of the victim in certain ways that our culture gives some kind of power to that, not in all situations and based on like your identity. That's not always true. One might think that, there's all these kinds of ways that we could identify that we might think about distancing ourselves from to get at the real conflict because these roles that we think we play, like they can get in the way of the actual thing that we're doing. And I see this ceding of authority when someone goes to an organizing event and something happens that they don't like. And then they expect the people that they perceive to have organized the space to somehow solve that problem or do something, which is exactly the kind of thing that we don't want to do with transformative justice. Because then you're saying these are the authorities and you don't take matters into your own hand, right? Which I think is important when there's conflict.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the seeding thing is just, it's one of our conditioned habits from living in a coercive society, and I think it's interesting, this dynamic you're describing where like somebody is in the meeting and I'm ceding authority to them and I think they're important in my community and maybe they are older or experienced or known speaker or something. Those people never feel powerful. right? Because they're also in the weird radical movement with you. Like everybody in our movements feels attacked, marginalized on some level, illegitimate compared to people who are in the center of authority. And even, like I'm a law professor, like even inside worlds of like fancy established people, everybody who's doing something anti-racist feels marginalized. Everybody's doing something feminist. Like there's endless levels, right? And nobody feels like they're getting their due, whatever, in our society in a way that's because it's extreme hierarchy. And so that's part of why people abuse power is because they don't feel power for it. Everyone feels like a victim. Everyone's looking up at who has more power than them or whatever. So that's instruction for all of us to be like, oh, to somebody else, I might be very influential and important. And so I should practice being non-defensive if they give me feedback. Like that's just, even though you're like just another unpaid person with all of whatever identities and all the shit you've been through and all the shit you go through every day, somebody else in your own community may think that person is the one everyone listens to and not me or something. That is happening between us all the time. And I think that basic skill, which I've seen you write about, of just like, if someone says something that I did something, take a minute. Like look for what might be grounded in this, even if it also came with some stuff that wasn't grounded or wasn't accurate to you, like just like really like that instruction to like assume that feedback might have something in it is so vital because most of us are kind of oblivious to power. And the other piece of it is that most people in our communities who are like wielding power because they know a lot of people, they're very well networked, they're influential, they're working their asses off. So they're also running an internal story about martyrdom. Like there's so much more and they're doing so much for so many people in our communities, and they've organized this whole conference, and now you're mad at them because they didn't do it right. And they're like, are you fucking kidding me? So the defensiveness stuff and built into being overextended. So that's a good information for all of us. When I'm overextended, what happened? A lot of conflicts happen when one or both people are overextended. No blame, no shame, but just like, oh, I'm overextended, so I'm having a hard time letting in feedback. I'm going to try to act non-defensive during this conversation and then go do some reflection on my own. I think it really makes a difference to act non-defensive, even if we are feeling some defensiveness. It's so fucked up to minimize someone else's experience. It's good to like actually just be like, I am now going to say that sounds really hard. I'm going to think about it instead of like, I didn't do that. Fuck you. But I think that these are just the dynamics I see everywhere. The like, I feel like the victim because I'm overworked. I feel like the victim because of actually my community role, and then I'm defensive.
I think that's important. Like, the martyr and victim are these roles that people take. I often talk, to people who are feeling a lack of confidence in what they're doing. I'm like, no one knows what they're doing, right? Like imposter syndrome is actually, whatever that word means. It's like, that's what everyone's enacting. Everyone's going in the world, like given a role or taking on a role and like feeling like they have no idea what they're doing and they don't belong there. I mean, not everyone, obviously. Some people believe that they belong in these positions of power and can do whatever. But in our world, I think it's like pretty common. I mean, it's like so true in like trans community, right? Like everyone's like, well, am I trans enough? Am I queer enough? Like, and so I don't know, being able to acknowledge that is helpful for yourself because you then let yourself off the hook of being some kind of expert of something. And then you can also approach other people knowing that, they're not like the all powerful Oz or something. They're just like another person trying their best and getting things wrong often. To bring it back to the letter, because I think there's different things. Like I think actually this person isn't taking on the role of a victim in the way that we might be talking about here, and actually has some distance from it. And I can imagine that the facilitators maybe think that they have done their work and their job and aren't able to recognize or acknowledge this person's disappointment in it and their feeling of harm in it. Because facilitating a accountability process is a lot of work. I mean, depending on how it's structured, it's like it's asking someone to do a lot of work and showing up. So whatever their conceptions are, they may feel like they should just be like thanked, right? And this person is contradicting that, which is another example of having to like trust someone's experience. Like if these people are really wanting to facilitate accountability process, then they need to be able to accept that someone who they were helping facilitate like didn't feel good about it, right? And the conflict kind of shifted there. But I think, I don't know. I think this person has a lot of insight, and I mean, it's for me, it's really hard to like think about how to give them advice about how to approach it because these people might be just digging down in a way that they can't get at. And it's hard to tell someone that they are doing that. Like someone has to come to the realization themselves, I think, that like what they're doing is not conducive to kind of open conversation or conflict resolution.
One of the questions I always have in our communities is, are some of us, because of the way we were raised and the way our coping mechanisms, are some of us really drawn to conflict and some of us are terrified of conflict? And so do some of us end up being conflict facilitators? Are we all just operating out of our limited coping mechanisms? And we want more people to be able to move towards conflict because we want people to be supported who are having conflicts. And we especially want people who have experienced harm to like get support. We want people who are doing harm to get support to stop. So we really want people to be willing to move towards conflict. But then also, if you do, people will be mad at you. Just like
Right.
That's hard, right? They will. Like you will do it wrong. So I think that's really challenging. Like that, like it's a pretty thankless role being part of these kinds of processes. And they'll be mad at you because you will do it very imperfectly. So like this is rough. And to ask people to trust getting support from community members when the community members will fuck up, and especially I think what's hard when people imagine like community accountability or transformative justice processes, it's like, well, when will it end? Like how do we declare this over when, especially like, let's say I've done harm to you and others in our community, and I've done that in part because I'm in crisis, mental health crisis, housing crisis, addiction crisis, whatever. Unlikely that a handful of people in our community can like resolve all that,
Right.
Like it's just, these are like intractable conditions in our society. So I've seen that again and again, unrealistic hope for what can be done to change the causes, even though some improvement for sure, or something better than putting people in a cage. But I think that's challenging. When I hear this person's story, if I knew them, it's so hard to talk, to not get to go back and forth with somebody. If I knew them, I might ask them why they had to block other members of their community to be safe, like what safety means exactly, because I'm worried, is it isolating them further? You know what I mean? Is there any way to be in community with these people? It sounded like these people have important roles. So I don't know if I'm interpreting this right, but if that means they're not going to stuff and they're not connecting to things they care about anymore, to stay away from these facilitators, is that working out? I just would want to find out, is there anything that can be moved around there at any point so that they don't have to be kept away from things that might be sources of more community for them? Because the isolation sounds pretty dangerous. And then also, like, if it was me, if I was living with this betrayal of like this process having been handled poorly and like this lack of support, and it was making me like not sure I wanted to live, I would really question my faith in people and in our politics. I would want to turn really towards like, it's like when the rug's been pulled out from under you by stuff with other people, it's like, how am I going to build myself a place to stand now? Like, what do I have to grieve? Like, how can I take seriously how much this really sucked and like feel compassion for all the parts of me that were hurt in it? Like, who do I want to talk to? What kind of tools do I want to use? Some people use rituals, some people talk to therapy, like whatever it is that people need to be like, I need to go through this loss so that I can figure out how I choose people in life now. That is the thing that is before them. And that could include something that involves those people or not. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there'd have to be a whole assessment of what is reasonable given, but I think so much of it is just really like digesting and integrating the loss so that we can, in my experience, when I've had those rugs pulled out from under me, I've actually then built a better base of interacting with the world. Like at best, what healing is not this never happened to me. It's not I was not scarred. It's there's even more me here now to choose to like be part of movements that are based in faith in people's goodness, even though I know how badly people act. Like I believe in people's goodness at a different level. That's what has happened for me with really bad betrayals. If I go through the work,
I think, in this story, there's like this repetition of harm from the level of like this interpersonal conflict, then to the accountability process. And I think that we tend to have a history of harm that is repetitive, right? And so if you have this repetitive experience of like, I had like a therapist who talked about it's like, Peanuts, where like Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown every time he goes to kick it, and he keeps doing it, right? And it keeps happening. Like you get that experience of like the fruitlessness of community because like that they'll keep pulling the rug out from under you. And that might be a reason to isolate yourself. And it's interesting to me that this person is able to let go of the person they had conflict with, but unable to let go of the disappointment of the facilitators. And like you're saying, like maybe that's an opportunity. Like they don't have to resolve something. Like they can let go of these people and grieve them, and they can have anger. Like anger is okay to have and let them go. And so then there's the problem of feeling isolated from the community where these people seem to be like having a big part. Like I think you're right to think, how then in this experience do I find the people that I want to be around? I don't have to be around these other people. And like one of the great things about the kind of anarchist approach to organizing is that like we have affinity groups as the main block. Like it's not, we don't need like everyone to be in the same group. And I think even anarchists get confused about this because we think like revolution involves everyone on the same page, right? So like if this person could find anyone that they feel safe and comfortable with, even one person, I think is like a building block for them. In a way, it seems like they've internalized a lot of the problems. They're not saying that quite, but I think the disillusionment with, this kind of prefigurative politics or the process that we think is good, like even though they sort of are saying the facilitators fucked up in a way that hurt them, they're taking it all on themselves by being alone. And I don't know if it's possible for them to find people. I really hope it would be. And it's a common experience, I think, like in queer communities and in organizing communities, that like everyone's like connected in these ways, and then something happens, you're the one who gets isolated. So I like, maybe if this person didn't internalize that and found some people, that could be a way through. And the thing, like there's the affinity group thing, like my breakup stuff is like an affinity group is a temporary thing. And the other thing I always come back to with anarchism is, and it feels impossible, is like to be able to imagine a world where everyone doesn't agree. Like you can't expect, though we want to validate other people's experiences, we can't then expect all of our experiences to align, and we have to let people do their thing, even if we think it's bad. Like, I mean, we don't have to let them. We could try to stop them, right? But you have to imagine that not everyone's going to do things your way. I think that this is a problem that facilitators have, because it is this role of like some kind of power, that like they will be able to get everyone on the same page to the extent that like we can resolve this. But I've seen other approaches, and I have mixed feelings about it, where like someone's like, I don't want to process. This person harmed me, and maybe even this person has done work to try to, not do harm in the future, but I just don't want to be around them. Can we find a way to like have spaces that I feel safe and comfortable in, and that they can have spaces, right? Like, how do you share like community in this way that doesn't involve like mashing you together with a person that you don't want to be around? I don't know. I mean, I think that gets tricky and sometimes feels authoritarian to me, but I think it's another way, if they're able to accumulate some people around them that they feel comfortable or safe with, then maybe they can figure out how to then create other spaces where it's safe for them, to do the things that they want to do.
I mean, one thing about this too is I think it's possible to be sad about how someone did some things wrong or what they were not good at, and then also still realize that they do other things well. And I wonder about that. Like, can these people be people who are any of these people who really fucked up when it came to this facilitation and really let this person down, but are not unsafe to be in a meeting with, or are people who care about their community in other ways? Like, just being able to hold the nuance of other people. I think that's very hard. I think it's like when someone does something that disappoints us or hurts us, we're just like, that's defining of who they are. And, I'm really into this question I use in my book a lot, like, what else is true? Like, can I remember that, like, Shuli really fucked me over as a roommate, but also is part of my trans community and cares about these things and does these things beautifully and has done these other things in our other points in our friendship, or at least is not my enemy, or at least is not actively harming me. Sometimes we use this term, which I think can be really controversial, about like self-generated safety. Like, where can I build a sense of safety? It's not going to necessarily show up with anybody. There's so many reasons to not feel safe with anybody, because we actually all can hurt each other really badly. And most of us have been hurt a lot by other people. And so I feel like people go out looking for safe people. And that's not always, it's got to be a combination of, okay, I'm going to, we all know sometimes we like chosen unsafe or shitty situations over here. So part of it is me being like, hey, right, Dean, don't go with that one. Don't get
Yeah.
in the car with the guy who's drunk this time, or whatever, right? Like, don't do things that learn, like we're all in a process of learning from our past experiences. Like, I'm sometimes drawn to certain things that work out bad, but also can I bring my sense of safety with me to some degree, not just with the choices I make, choosing things that are going to work out better, hopefully, even if they're kind of counter to some of my instincts were from growing up or whatever. And then also like making myself safe through certain forms of having backup and support in certain situations, reminding I'm sure you've had the experience, like spent a lot of my life like out on a limb saying things that nobody else agrees with in the context I'm in. How do I make myself safe enough to do that emotionally? And take all of the hits of all the negative things these people are going to say about me. Well, I'm like, you know what? I don't care what these people think. I care about those people. Or, I do whatever set of things you have to do. Like just having a more active role in our sense of safety. This is not to deny that unsafe things happen to us, but also that like in this incredibly unsafe world, what can I bring with me? I think a lot of us hope that we will arrive at a social circle or in a love relationship or in a community organizing group where we will finally feel safety and belonging. And we don't.
Yeah.
Everyone's an imposter. Everyone's scary. Everyone's making mistakes. Everyone's iterating the scripts of the mainstream by accident. Everyone's a learner. And I think that it's very hard to talk about this without sounding like victim blaming. You know what I mean? But it's like, It's not that the direct harm and attack aren't happening. It's that the process of finding a way to tolerate how unsafe the world is includes this kind of empowerment that I think is very anarchist. That's about like not ceding power to you, doing more direct action to take the space the way I want it to myself, finding what I need, and tolerating people's imperfections, like figuring out like what's really a threat to me and what's just like, not ideal. Or, I would plan an event with that person, but I would not sleep over at their house, or I would not go camping with them or whatever. Just like figuring out like what I can stand to do with different people. One other piece I want to bring into this, I had this really interesting conversation with somebody recently who was like struggling. She was like, sometimes I wish we could ban people from dating in our movement groups because we all have to deal with their breakups. And like, we didn't agree. When you decided to start fucking, we didn't all agree. And now when we break up, you want us all to hold it. And when people break up, I mean, you're the expert in this from your podcast. When people break up, we see each other through the worst lens. I mean, we really think the other person is a monster a lot of the time. And we also do terrible things to each other in our dating relationships. But I personally believe it's not useful if, I lied and cheated and all these things, and then the community treats me like I actually engaged in sexual assault and violence. Those are not the same thing. It's real. This stuff is really hard. But like, our communities are blowing up over this. And so this is when I start to worry about our expectations that others will hold our conflicts and will do it well. There's a real mismatch going on between our skills and our needs, and between our expectations of community and of other people and what we're getting. And it's really creating a lot of what feel like impossible situations that then people claim it to be failures of transformative justice. And I'm like, oh, no, these are just the conditions.
In your book, you also talk about how your sort of activated response is true to a certain extent because it's activated from something that's happened to you before. But then do you ask yourself, like, is this situation actually repeating the thing that happened before? And I think that's like often the cause of breakups is like how people activate each other, right? And like the relationship itself might not be doing the things, but you really believe that that's happening. And so if there's a breakup, then you're staying from that position of like, the truth is the trauma that I've always had, right? Rather than what the other person is doing, or like being able to understand what the other person is doing in a different way, like that way of saying it's another person's experience. It is really hard to do that, and it's hard to get out of those patterns. But there's certainly a difference between the person who like serially harms people, right, and seeks out victims, and the couple who like activate each other or bring out the worst in each other, right? Yeah, it's very hard to make those distinctions. And when someone feels harmed, they want everyone to like be on their side, which maybe is also what contributes to the isolation, because you have these high expectations of the people. Again, I don't want to be victim blaming, because like the most work I've done is to support like survivors, and it's so disappointing to see that. And like, because like to actually support someone involves a lot of community work that people don't want to do, maybe don't have the time to do. It kind of involves a lot of time if someone doesn't feel safe in particular. And so it's super disappointing. And then the isolation kind of rebounds on itself. And this is what this person's experiencing. Like the disenchantment is so strong that they remove themselves from the situation, which I understand. When everyone seems to be against you, it's hard to have any faith in anything. And it might not be true. It might be true that people are like sort of set against you. It could be either way. It could be, a perception or a projection. A lot of, I think, of our existence is projecting things onto others. And we could sort of shift that and meet each other elsewhere. But I don't know, I want to deal with this disenchantment because I think it's also, they've talked about this has been a number of years, and over the time, their belief in these processes has dwindled, and also their love of the world itself, because that was like their attachment to it. Like we've said, like accountability and transformative justice are these, I don't know, I say that's like a magic word, an ideal that we think we have and we don't. A community is also like that. And I think faith in anarchy or something like that is like that too. And then when the world's fucking crumbling, and you probably feel victimized for a bunch of other reasons that are out of your control and structural, I totally understand this pessimism, and I totally understand the desire to shut yourself off from it. And I don't know if you have thoughts about that. How do you reattach yourself, or can you calibrate in a way that acknowledges your despair and pessimism, but also helps find the possibility of connection somewhere?
I don't know if this is exactly what's happening to this person, but something about the way you framed it made me think about, what if maybe this person thinks these people all think something certain of them? You know what I mean? I think that's a really common symptom, especially at the age of the internet. Everyone in my community thinks this of me. Especially if for a while, a bunch of people said something like that about you on the internet, it can be like, oh my God, it can feel like a permanent condition. The reality, of course, is that most people don't think about anyone besides themselves. People
Yep.
barely think of others, barely. And certainly not in a sustained way. Nobody gives as much of a fuck about me and all my little things as me. Nobody, which is such a relief in some ways. They're just not thinking about you. They just aren't. And if in passing they think of me and they think, oh, Dean, who did that bad thing in our community years ago, if that is their last thought, if they have other interactions with me, they'll think those things then. I've been in our movements for something like 28 years. I have seen people go through being maligned, stick around and keep working, and people move on. It doesn't feel like it could ever happen, but it does happen. People forget. I'll remember someone and be like, oh yeah, there was some big controversy about them. I don't remember what it was. I don't care. I think
Yeah.
most of us can't hold on to all of the controversies, don't really care, don't even at the time, didn't really know if that was real or not, didn't really care, And so one of my questions always is can we loosen any of that? If that's what I'm holding on to that's keeping me isolated. And a lot of people I know, I read some book about the ways that internet culture have changed people, and how now when people get through middle school, they've had almost everybody's had some painful, agonizing internet drama where they felt like everyone in their school saw this thing about them, even if it was 10 people saw it. So this type of wounding, I think, is more patterned into people right now, of believing others have believers or have seen something about them. So I just wonder, what are the tools to question that in ourselves, to not operate as if that's necessarily true, to get some clarification, whether that's checking out a shame story with other people in the community who you find safe. Do people really think this about me? A lot of times, I see people go to a meeting and one person says something, and then in their mind, everyone in the meeting said that about them. Because maybe nobody disagreed because everyone's scared of conflict. But one fucking person said it. So that's also the what else is true. Who else? Who in this community doesn't think that about me? Who's nice to me when I ran into them? Who, can I stop looking for just the most scary evidence? Something that I want to pitch to you, Shuli, that I feel insecure about, but it's been in my mind a lot lately. I feel like it might be problematic. But the part where we look at what am I bringing to the table? What formative experiences might I have had about belonging, safety, others, rescue, that might make something be might make an experience crack me. You know what I mean? Might make an experience really make me question fundamental things. I find that most people I know, even who are doing a lot of self-work, don't actually want to look at their childhoods. It's actually a taboo. So even people I know who read every self-help book and do all of, whatever. It's that part. And part of the reason why I think it's not safe in our culture to take account for what we're bringing to the picture. Because if I say, hey, Shuli, I'm having trouble with this thing about your behavior, and I think I'm bringing this into the picture from my own, I think I'm sensitive to this because of my own blah, blah, blah. I'm afraid that you'll say, well, Dean, this isn't really happening. You're just sensitive to that because of the thing with your mom, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And people do that to each other. People
Yeah.
actually do that. If you're vulnerable and say what you're bringing, a lot of times people will be like, yep, it's not real, and dismiss the feedback. And I've literally had countless conversations with friends who are telling me about conflict with their roommate or their lover or whatever. And I'm like, huh, I wonder if that's anything to do with this childhood experience of yours that I already know about. And then they're like, I can't bring that up because I'll be dismissed. So I don't know. Like, I just want to raise that as a consistent element that I think in our culture, the thing that's cool to do is to be like, I am the victim for these 16 politicized reasons and sometimes identity words or things like that. And I can break down these reasons for it. And it's one thing only, and you're bad and I'm good. That's the safer space. And that's an understandable thing that we do that when we're aggravated and activated. But when we want to heal something like this person's describing, I think sometimes it can be useful to be like, why did this get me to my core?
Mhm.
Like what about this situation really opened my existing wounds, which doesn't mean these people didn't do bad things. It's not dismissing, it's not minimizing the harm. But if I'm going to figure out how I can come through this and believe in other people in my life again, I think I do have to look at why this thing, because not everything hurts us equally, right? Like we
Yeah.
all experience lots of disappointments, betrayals, people acting a fool in our lives, at work, at school, in our roommates, in our everything, right? Why do some things feel like they break our faith in living? And
Mhm.
I don't know. I would be curious how this strikes you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, the way that you said cracks you, I think like that really spoke to me because not everything affects you the same. There are certain kinds of harm and conflict that you can be resilient against, right? And then there's certain things, and they could feel so trivial sometimes that you like cannot recover from. And I think that is really important to investigate for yourself, not as a like victim blaming thing, but like to be able to then be intentional with the attachments that you find afterwards. And we think about this a lot within romantic relationships, right? It's like to be able to have a good relationship, and we define good relationship like a long-term monogamous relationship, you have to have done the work. And the work that you do is to overcome your trauma by understanding it and then not repeating it, or being able to take a step back from it and then, not reenact it. We sort of have this sense of that in terms of romance, but maybe not as much in any other situation because we also value the romantic relationship more than like friendship or an organizing relationship. And so it's much easier to let those go or just like walk away from them without feeling like your whole identity and life has been ripped apart, right? Especially if you're like living with someone, like, I can't let this, I have to figure it out. I wonder if this person could, even within their despair and enchantment, and their, I believe, the truth of the harm that they've experienced, from these facilitators who may or may not know or be able to acknowledge it, though I guess they're respecting a boundary. How can this person, in order to find the reattachment, think about what has amplified this or what has made it so hard to overcome or like, made it ungrievable, like you're saying? Like I know, for example, I'm stuck, right, in my own thing. I read everything with a negative like a negative tone. Like every text, every email, even interactions, I'm like, this person hates me. Like I just like, I don't know. Like I feel like that the thing I carry is like I'm a constant disappointment. I am like letting people down. I'm a failure or whatever, and I can't meet these expectations. So then I bring this into, you know, just not necessarily like I actually act that way, but like in myself when I'm sitting with a message, I have to really be like, this person isn't upset, right? And if they're upset, they should tell me. And like my, it's not my responsibility to like now fix a problem that doesn't exist. And like you said, they're probably not even fucking thinking about me at all. Like, you just like dash off a text or whatever. So yeah, I mean, for me, that's like something that I found hard in organizing spaces, especially when someone is like mean and seems to not like you, right? And then it reaffirms this feeling. And then you're like, well, I don't belong in this group because like no one spoke up about it. And I didn't feel like I could engage the conflict because of how painful it was. Or I like I don't know all these people that well or something like that. So if something happens that really attaches to the thing that you bring about, it's very hard to feel empowered to address it. And I really believe that these facilitators probably weren't able, had no idea, couldn't approach this and hold it for this person. And this person maybe wasn't even able to articulate it, right?
The thing you just demonstrated, learning about your tendency, and then when you're experiencing your tendency, there's like a millimeter of space between the tendency and the belief in it or the action that it would generate. That's healing. That's, I think, the only thing we can expect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to outgrow a lot of my tendencies because they're super baked in from really intense stuff. But freedom isn't not having that shitty experience anymore of that tendency coming up. Freedom is just having enough space to choose what to do next. When I get that feeling, like look for support, try to read it in another tone, do nothing for a moment. Imagine they're not thinking of me, whatever, like just having any space from being run by whatever the old message is. And I want that for all of us. When you said the thing about cracked, I thought about, I don't know if you've ever been to spaces where people sing this Leonard Cohen lyric as a kind of prayer, but I'm just going to say it. I can't sing. Like nobody wants to hear me sing it. Forget your perfect offering. Just ring the bells that still can ring. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. When I think about this person or any of us getting to like heal from and move on from such painful losses and something that really did get in your, wounded place and crack you open, and imagining like the light coming in, like this wound is now seeing more daylight. I get to update, it gets to grow new fauna and flora, inside this part of me that has been reopened by contemporary experience with my peers. And can I end up, ringing the bells that still can ring? Like, yeah, I can't undo childhood wounds or rewounding that happens in my adult life, but I can build enough of a base under myself to want to do stuff with people. And that includes knowing I'm going to be disappointed again,
Mm-hmm.
probably. You know what I mean? Like, just like holding that, loving people even though they're imperfect. And when I hear this story, I honestly have no idea what happened with these facilitators. I care about what this person is feeling regardless of what happened. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
care about
Yeah.
every single person in our community feeling disappointment, even if everybody was doing their very best, even if somebody else would have liked it, it doesn't matter. It's like their disappointment matters. And like that's how I want us to talk to ourselves. All of my feelings and disappointments and concerns and anger, they all truly matter. And I still get to decide what story I want to make from it, what my actions are going to be. Like I'm feeling really, really, really hurt by Shuli. It doesn't mean I have to believe Shuli's bad. There's a whole range of things that might happen, but the feeling is totally acceptable. I think part of it is we are like either Shuli's horrible or my feeling isn't real. Those are our two options. That's the minimization punishment,
Mm-hmm.
binary of our culture. And it's like, what if, and then you see this, I think, in our intimate relationships you were describing earlier, like if we're roommates or lovers or something, what I really want is still to be like, oh, I'm really hurt by what Shuli said, and Shuli didn't mean to hurt me. Both of those things are true. Can we hold that and be like, can there be enough room for all of that to be true? That's like a very rare, that's actually to me a space of accountability where you could also
Mm-hmm.
be like, Dean, the thing I said had this impact on you. I care about that. I'm going to see if I can avoid having that impact again. And I'm also going to be like, truly, I see that you didn't mean for it to feel that way to me. I'm going to see if I can avoid interpreting that way again, because that's not fair to you. Like we're both taking accountability for our part in the drama.
Yeah. I think with this person, because they're so articulate and about the situation and have analysis of it, it may become so abstract that they can't see that they're probably blaming themselves a lot for this, right? And like maybe at one point the isolation was necessary, right? Like to feel safe. I believe that that's true. We actually talked about it the last time we recorded, like that you might need your own space to feel safe. But this has been years, right? And nothing has gotten better for this person. And so like I think trying to approach it thinking that they may be taking on the blame, and they're also therefore also demanding from themselves some kind of re-enchantment with like anarchism and the world and the possibility of a better world. Like this failure has made them lose faith, right? Like I think kind of trying to remove that would be one way that's possible. I don't know, for them to kind of get out of it and like think, does this isolation serve me anymore? Clearly this person doesn't want to be alone and isolated, right? And how do you get out of that? It might not be to go back into this space right now, right? Even though it's years, you might find other people that you wouldn't expect also to be your people, right? Like they're not the anarchists or the trans people or the punks or like whatever. It's like, or they are, but they aren't overlapping all of the things that you want, right? And they could actually offer you a kind of love and connection that you didn't find in an organizing space, which often is like filled with martyrdom and self-seriousness and like high expectations and like hero worship and all this stuff.
Yeah, sometimes I think also when people have these kind of betrayals, they switch what they're working on. They're like, "Oh, I was doing all work in the, with radical artists, and now I'm actually gonna go be part of this health mutual aid project, or I'm gonna be part of this library or whatever." Like, I think it actually can be renewing to our faith in others to go to a different space where there's a set of people who are trying something different and have a different, sometimes same problem, sometimes different set of problems. It can just be kind of helpful to practice faith by digging in with some new people.
I mean, that's for me the letting go. I mean, there's a version of it. Like I remember I was involved in an encampment and I went to an assembly, disagreed with the strategies or tactics that people are saying. I offered mine. People were like, "That's really good, but we're not going to do it." And I was like, I was the only one, right? And so I was like, okay, this is the scope of the group. And then I decided to what extent I'm going to interact with them. And I felt like I was going to remove myself a little bit because I wasn't as invested in the stuff that they were doing, but I would still try to offer support to the extent that I felt like I could, or that it was worth my time or whatever, because I know that they were trying something, right? That's one way, right? Like to take space from a group. But I think you're right. It's like, if this place isn't working for you, maybe there's another place and it might not be also expected. That's the thing that I'm trying to offer to this person, because like re-enchantment doesn't mean returning necessarily to the thing that you loved before, right? It might be moving into a different direction with different people.
Or not wanting to be enchanted again. I want to encounter people more sober.
Yeah.
There's something. I love your story about the encampment because I think this is a fundamental like anarchist idea that people have a hard time with. If I join a group, and maybe it's the only group in my town doing the thing, and they all want to do it this way, and I want to do it this way. A lot of people are like, I have to stop them. No,
Mm-hmm.
you don't. You know what I mean? Just do
Yeah.
the part they're into, or see if the group can tolerate having two tactics and people split into two different teams that try different things, or go find some other people to do something with. But like, I mean, unless what they're doing is harmful. Like, yes, I think if you're in a group and they want to work with the cops, stop them. Or if they want to like support Israel, stop them. But like, if it's just like you all want to prioritize this and I want to prioritize this, or you want to do more, I think the inability to handle dissensus and autonomy, and the need to like stop other people's action, or the only way I'll feel powerful is to stop. I think there are whole people whose entire organizing worlds are just about trying to stop others from doing stuff, and it is not cool. And it feels powerful to them because they've got some like political rationale, but I am quite worried about it. I think like, what if we just knew that we all had externalizing and internalizing impulses, aggression, self-hatred, paranoia, jealousy, like all of this stuff is just, we are just like these amorphous blobs of flashing color, of all these different emotions. And then you don't have to take them that seriously. You're not like, okay, now I'm never going to another anarchist space again because I had, 20 minutes of feeling really irritated at the anarchist book fair. It's like, no,
Yeah.
same with each other. You and I run into it at a party and I have a headache and I'm not friendly, and it doesn't have to become a 20-year story about how our friendship is terrible. But that kind of stuff happens to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I think part of it, how can we hold one another and ourselves generously? And especially right now, people are doing very, very poorly. Like, there are like extermination orders for our people coming from the
Mm-hmm.
highest offices in the world. Like, let's assume everyone's really going through it. There's like a brutal pandemic that's ripping apart our bodies. There's like, greater concentration of wealth and greater poverty, all the things. Rents are so high, food is so high. Like, can we just try to have a generous read on each other? A little bit. Like, it's okay that people might hate people some days or whatever, and then we run into them and then we feel like they were not warm. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I actually listened to an episode of Adrienne Marie Brown and Autumn Brown's podcast where they were talking about giving and receiving feedback and stuff. There was a part of it where Adrienne was describing someone like really coming after her on the internet and how she didn't want others to defend her or go after them because she just felt that person's in crisis. And I was like,
Mhm.
nice. Like, to be able to remember that someone who's attacking you might be actually having a really hard time. That's the next level move of this kind of compassion. Are they really hurting me? Or are they just saying stuff about me? Okay. Like, it'll all come out in the wash or whatever. People,
Yeah.
I can't control what other people think of me. Like, she felt protective of the person who was making an ungrounded attack on her. I was like, that's the shit. I would like to
Yeah.
have that capacity in my compassion.
And it seems like this person was able to do that to a certain extent
Mhm.
with the person who harmed them and unable to do it with the facilitators. But I'm thinking like the context that we're living in where our very lives are in danger and it's like from one moment to the next, we don't know how imminent it is. And then we're also watching, all kinds of people getting rounded up and right. Like I think that with this person's experience, like combined, like can totally make sense to be like completely disenchanted because you're like the place where I felt like a little bit okay about the terrors of the world isn't good and then the world is getting more terrible, right? So there is a real external sort of validation of this person's despair that is maybe not directly linked at all to the experience they had and could probably make it feel like there's no exit because also so many people are struggling that it's hard to make connection, right? Like people really retreat or find like ways to cope that maybe aren't good or whatever that you don't want to be around. So I guess if this person could take that into consideration and also the way that they might be affected by it and how it relates to this other experience and be gracious with themselves and maybe with people that they don't ever want to fucking see again, right? But, just in order to allow themselves to like kind of move on and let go or at least orient themselves in this world with something next to you, you know?
I'm glad you raised this because this has happened to me a lot lately. I spend a lot of time talking to people about the conflicts in their groups. And sometimes I'll
Yeah.
hear a story or I'll witness a conflict in a group. And because things are so bad right now, I will feel a different kind of hopelessness. I'm like, fuck, we can't even do this. Or like, oh shit, even this project's going to tank. And I see this, I've had some other friends who've been involved in conflicts and kind of lost groups that they were really, really cared about. And it's like their grief around the conditions right now and the amount of brutal loss in the world and in their own lives is like compounded. The conflict is like so devastating because that was where we were fucking trying to do something different. And even that didn't work. And wow, we really are living in these conditions. So I just want to normalize that every piece of loss in our community work is like a bigger kick in the gut right now
Hmm.
when things feel so spiraling, doom, nightmare stuff. And like my personal belief is like, I still plan to continue being part of the fight until I die. And I actually think people are inherently good and that we have business together. And I have no idea how are we going to get out of this and who's going to survive. And, like, it's just, I don't, there's no like kind of liberal hopefulness in there for me. There's just a choice about how I want to live this life. That means that I turn back towards community spaces, even though they are disappointing and it's heartbreaking. But I think like again, just giving it enough space to grieve it, give it like being like letting it ourselves feel how sad we are.
I think like also there's a misunderstanding potentially, or at least, okay, the way that I approach like the idea of prefigurative politics is like less future oriented because we don't know the future and from the kind of political analysis that I do, like not knowing the future is where there's hope. The energy we put now is either destroying this world or like in our intimate daily interactions acting how we want. That's the prefigurative part, but like it isn't in relation to something after that we know, or we can, like, I don't believe in a revolution, right? And like that can cause despair or feeling of nihilism, which I think is important to let in. But it's like these everyday things where we can feel some space of like freedom and community that can help counteract this thing. And I don't mean that in the terms of like a quietist, like, or lifestyle anarchism thing. More politically, I think it's again like the letting go of a sense of like what it means to succeed or what is possible to stop, and like who is supposed to be on your side, or and stuff like that.
Yeah, and just this is it. Like, I'm alive now,
Mhm.
and I do not know what I'm going to live to see or how much longer I'm going to live. So it's like, today, can I enact as much my values as possible? Can I enjoy connection with others and belonging and safety and like whatever else is available, and creativity and also just grieving and being with what's here and like witnessing what this world is, and then to whatever degree possible, doing some choosing to move motivated by things I care about, knowing that so much is out of my control. It's a very humbling, and I think sometimes these big losses, these betrayals, stuff, they're very humbling. They bring
Yeah.
us down to just like, okay, what is possible here with how people are right now and what's going on? Can I be delighted by something? Maybe by bringing my expectations down a bit. I think that's the difference I see between really new people in our movements, like brand new people, often having their first big disappointments with other in groups. That those groups, things are explosive. I worked with tons and tons of mutual aid groups that formed in 2020 where nobody in the group had ever done any kind of organizing before. And you can imagine the kinds of
Yeah.
excitement and hope for what this stuff is based on really like overly simplistic liberal, images from the media and stuff versus the reality of what it is to do mutual aid work and be with others and be in the crisis together, and just the kinds of conflict that come up when people are having those initial disappointments. And I hope that when people stay in, I think most people leave the movement after their first major disappointment or conflict. But from people who stay in, you start to be like, oh, right. I just started joined this group. Shuli's my new best friend. We have crushes on each other. This work is going to be amazing. It's going to be so wild. And then I know that I'm actually on an arc and we are going to disappoint each other. And there's going to be times when we don't see eye to eye. And like the group is not going to do what I want. And like, I'm like, yeah, that's how it goes. It's still worth sticking around.
Like you can stick around and also move to the side to do something else, right? That's still a version of sticking around. In the end, like, I mean, we've been talking about this, but like my two kind of feelings are like, what we need to do is let other people off the hook, right? Which might be just like, yeah, it could be saying their intentions are probably good. It could be saying these people fucked up and they're never gonna do what I want them to do. And then also like find a way to like, it can be so simple as having like someone put a hand on your chest to like feel like something like hope or grounded. And maybe this person's so isolated that they don't have that, but like I think they will free themselves to the extent that they let these people off the hook or just do not expect anything from them. And then that way perhaps be able to open themselves to something different that may be completely unexpected or like not match the organizing they were doing before, because maybe also something else is necessary now.
Yeah, in my book, I write about how you can do the entire repair process and forgiveness process without the other person. Like that you can do it with somebody who's dead, you can do it with somebody who won't participate with you. And I think that's important that like if what is required is like being witnessed and how bad it hurt, I can do that with myself and or even recruit friends to help me witness that if I want it. I can achieve that witnessing without the other person ever knowing they did it. And I can find ways to understand the conditions that produce their behavior. And I can make myself a list of ways I'm going to keep myself safe from that happening to me again. All of that without them. You can have the process of repair that can produce more safety inside, even without the other person participating. But sometimes in our communities, I think people don't give others a chance to participate.
Mm.
Like, I think we are very hesitant to tell somebody, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about some stuff that, I felt impacted by in your behavior and I want so that we can move on. Or like when I talk to people, so often they're like, yeah, I'm not going to tell her because she's not going to listen anyway, or we're not that close anyway, or I don't really care, or she moved away, or like we have a million reasons why we don't want to have that confrontation because it's scary. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm also just like sometimes like, is there any chance it would be good for me to talk to this person or these people, like, and then maybe they're not all the same. If there's more than one person, I'm guessing they're different. Is there a window with any of them? Like, is there any benefit to direct contact? Because I do think we shy away from that. And so I would ask us all to encourage our friends when they're sharing complaints about others to be like, what would it be like to have a direct communication about that? Because also, like, that's how we grow.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if I'm doing stuff that's not working for other people in my community. And like, I think most of us mostly do, even if we're, we are sometimes defensive. And also a lot of people need to be told something by like 25 people before they make a difference. So you can't go into the feedback session being sure you'll get like accountability or apology, because, a lot of us have to be told. If it's something we do that's really shitty, it's probably kind of baked in, because none of us mean to be shitty. So, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in having the interaction and, setting yourself up for whatever you need to feel supported, like making sure there's friends to talk to afterwards or whatever will work, but like taking that risk,
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking for a long time, and I don't think we're going to solve this person's problem or give them like a blueprint for how to get out. But like some last thoughts for me are just like, do not cede power to these people that your life has to be destroyed by them, because you can't necessarily expect them to do what you want. And they aren't even thinking about you probably. And then, let yourself off the hook, because it sounds to me like you're blaming yourself a lot, even though it seems very clear that these are the people who hurt you. And yeah, I mean, there is something worth considering, like you're saying, in perhaps having a conflict that might not be resolved, and a conflict that just in terms of expressing it maybe in the community itself would be relieving. But also, like, move on if you want. Move on to somewhere else. Like, you can say fuck them, they're not working for me, and go somewhere else. Do you have any final thoughts?
Similarly, I mean, I think it's worth, like, if there's a trusted friend or friends or people who you think are grounded to talk to, and just be like, am I missing anything? Is there anything, like, are any one of these people somebody that you would actually have the conversation with? Am I missing a chance at repair? Or, you know what, this ship has sailed. Let me not give up faith in all people because of this handful of people. Like, let me find something good to connect with others on, because I'm alive, and this is a chance for healing. Like, these experiences are a chance to be more alive, to be more committed to being with others.
Well, I hope at least this person will feel seen or heard by us. And I am like grateful that they reached out and shared a very hard situation.
And I really want to apologize if anything that I have said has mischaracterized their experience. It's so hard to read an email and know what's there. And I think it's very tender stuff. And so it's very likely that we both probably made assumptions about the fact pattern or about what it might feel like. And I just really, I really apologize if there's any way that they didn't feel heard, or other people, since so many people have experiences like this who are listening. If, like, whatever it is that we missed, there's a lot of dimensions here. This is, a very humble attempt to discuss something pretty complex. And, I hope that everybody who's listening finds the support and witnessing for their parts of the experience. Yeah.
I might have said something like that you don't agree with, and just be like, well, I don't fucking agree with that thing, Like, I don't know. My ideas change like all the time based on experience. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Well, thank you, Dean, for giving us the time and your perspective, which I really respect and I'm grateful for, and I've learned from all the time. I really appreciate you coming on and tackling this letter with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It means a lot to me. I love your show.
I love all of your work. This has been The Breakup Theory. Rate, follow us, share us with the exes, and follow me over at cawshinythings.com. Thank you for your support. Until next time, bye.